Hello, hello. So yes, it's another one of these videos, partly because I promised it, partly because, when they company flies you out and shows you some stuff and they're expecting to get your feedback and stuff, it would feel remiss not to post a video on it, right? So here we are. Don't mind the kind of nonsense bullet points. I kind of just didn't want my big stupid face to be on the screen, and I'm maintaining my status as the most fraudulent content creator they sent there by just doing this. So for those who don't know, I went to the Content Creator Summit that UVS Games held this past weekend. They flew us in, they showed us some stuff, they flew us home. I don't want to get into like the step-by-step play-by-play of what happened there. You can get that from some other videos. I'm going to try to be as reasonably brief with this as I can. So first and foremost, I kind of want to talk about what my concerns really were going in, because unlike a lot of people, I wasn't that concerned about the design changes in the set. And this is largely because, Bill Stark had hinted in one of his articles that they were going to be interested in doing some deciduous stuff, which means mechanics and stuff that were only going to be present for one IP. And given that, I kind of figured even if they do kind of mess some stuff up, they're not like hard committing to making everything some long-term permanent change, right? So yeah, I'm not gonna begrudge them some experimentation. This game's been around a while, you might as well try some stuff, right? But what I was worried about, first of all, I was pretty frustrated with, as we all are, right, with the sort of absent, bare minimum communication we get from UVS Games, including most recently stuff regarding local prize support, but also organized play and just generally, right? They're not out there talking to us very much, the way that from other English-speaking companies, you generally expect. You don't really see this stuff from, like, Japanese companies, right? But, there's a lot of frustration about that, of a lot of just, like, not understanding what the company was about, that sort of thing. And as part of that, I was concerned, and I know some other people are concerned about where they were as a business, right? So, because what we know about this company is that some tech investor, Wall Street guys bought it off of Jason, and they've been running it ever since. And that's about the extent of what we know, right? And so there's a lot of questions about, what are these guys about? What are they really trying to do? What are their objectives? What are their expectations, right? Is this the sort of thing where if they don't hit a certain ROI by a certain date, they're just going to shut it down? Like that sort of thing. There's a lot of worries in that space, coupled with this Attack on Titan release and how big of a deal they're making out of it. Are they, is this like a last-ditch effort? Is this something they're saying, we need this to save the company? Like that kind of thing, because, they've grown, but not by, doesn't seem like they've grown by a ton, and the company's quite a bit larger than it used to be, right? So there's a lot of, vague concerns in that area going in, and then that was kind of one of the main things I wanted to try to get answers to. And so I'm going to actually lead with the sales presentation, which everyone else is just kind of papering over, because for most people, it's not really that much to talk about. But this was, Mike Dunlap came up, he showed us some slides, obviously, super proprietary information. There were no numbers on it, but just kind of like vague bar graphs of how different things, performed relative to other things. And one of the graphs showed sort of what their expectations for the Attack on Titan set were, and without trying to put a number on it, I think despite all the public hype that they're putting on this, I think their actual expectations for this set are much more reasonable. Right? Paul's going to go around and say that he wants the set to 10x the player base, and I'm sure they would very much like to 10x their player base, right? That's the goal, that's what they're trying to do. Obviously, they're trying to grow the game, but it's not a situation where they're going to call the set a failure, right, if it doesn't do that, for instance. So I was actually very, very relieved to see that. And then, with some other conversations, this isn't, I came away feeling pretty assured that this is not there's no imminent threat of them shutting this down. There's not some deadline that they're trying to make a certain amount by this deadline. Nobody's going to pull the rug out from under it or anything like that. At the risk of saying something kind of bold, honestly, I think Paul is really every bit as committed to making this work as Jason was. So, take that as you will, right? But I don't think there's any danger of, UVS games just kind of shutting its doors at any point anytime soon. And I'll just work backwards from there. So we'll talk about creative next. A lot of other people have sort of sung Zoe's praises. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm just going to put a link in the description to an interview they did with Zoe during one of the weekly pre-shows. This was around Jetburn time. This was leading into This was like Jetburn preview season. She was showing off some cards there and talking about what they were doing and talking about, you know, her role. And I'd just say just watch that. Just watch that and imagine that we got like, you know, a 45-minute version of that kind of 15-minute interview, right? Where she got to go into a little more depth on things. And you'll get the idea. You'll see what Zoe's about. You know, as someone who doesn't care about Attack on Titan at all, I thought the cards looked really good. Take that as you will, right? Because I'm not a fan, I can't get like super max hype about them, but I think they look really good, right? And now the next section is, of course, design. This is the big one. This is the one that, you know, people are the most worried about. Before I get into it, just to be clear, I think a lot of people, you know, because, you know, I'm an old head, right? I've been playing this game for 18 years, because I was lead designer for a couple of years. I've worked on design at other points in time and pitched in and helped out here and there. They associate me with a lot of their own old boomer curmudgeonliness. And I'm very much not that. Out of the people that have been in this for a while, I am probably, if not the most, then very close to the most aggressive in terms of my willingness to make changes to the game. I am, you know, quite happy to change or get rid of things that other people hold sacred. So, you know, if you think that Bill Stark's going to kill all of your sacred cows, I promise you I would make a steakhouse, okay? So, just to set things straight, right? I'm very much on the radical end of this. You know, that said, right, there is a collection of things that I think are very key and central to the game that I would not want to touch, and there are some things that I think aren't critical, but they provide value, and I wouldn't want to give them up without getting some stuff in return, right? If I wasn't getting equal or better value in return, we might as well keep the thing, right? Pretty simple trade stuff, but anything else that doesn't fall under those 1-2 things that I don't think is really providing value and I don't think it's crucial, I'm willing to chop it. So with that said, there were, I don't know, a half dozen-ish, like, if you were to bullet point it out, things that could be considered topics when it comes to design changes and additions and things in that space. To start with the two that, you know, to kind of go in like ascending positivity order here, right? There's two places. Well, there's one place where they are trading something of value, the sort of thing that I referenced before. And in return, they're getting two things, I would say. And I think... I don't know how I feel about the return in this set, within Battle for Humanity itself. I might not feel that great about it, but I think there's some potential to turn those returns into something that's really, really good in the long term. And so overall, I'm kind of down. You know, we'll see how they handle this going forward. But net, I'm kind of down to make the exchange. The other thing, I'm not sure that they're giving up, but it looks like they might be. And if they are giving up something of value and getting nothing for it. Obviously, if that's the case, then I'm not very much in favor of it. You know, that's the, you know, if you read my tweets, that's kind of the one detrimental thing I'm referencing here. And also, while it's a thing that is a thing of value to Attack on Titan, for some other IPs, it's kind of mission critical. So at the very least, I assume / hope that it's not going to leave this IP. Aside from those two things, the other stuff was all neutral to good. There's a couple things they did that are like, you know, sure, why not? This has a chance to be pretty cool. It might not work, but I'm kind of down to try it and see what happens. And then there's a couple things that I think are just genuinely good things that I hope stick around long term and that I believe will. That are just solid improvements that it's hard to poke too many holes in. Like there's some like slight differences in maybe how I would envision approaching them, but like nothing to get too hung up on, and I think they're just genuinely straight up good things. Next thing I want to talk about is what I call the macro design of the set. This is sort of, obviously, we did not see the full set. We saw, I don't know, 30-ish cards that were kind of handed around during the art talk section. The idea was to look at the pictures, but obviously most of us were going to read the cards. But, so, you know, it's not like I've seen the full set, so I can't, this isn't a, like, this is definitely a problem thing, right? But I do have some concerns about sort of the overall, not like the individual cards, but the set as a whole and what it looks like. Because this set would have had 3 goals, right? Presumably, right? One of the goal is to streamline, you know, not necessarily simplify, but maybe more streamline, make the experience of the newer player a little bit better and smoother. I think it's done that to an extent. I don't know if it's done that really enough, but like I appreciate that they're taking some kind of baby steps in this. You know, so, you know, 1 or 2 of the things they changed will, you know, definitely help newer players get through those first few locals and feel a little bit better about it, which is the main concern I have, aside from, you know, the demo experience they've worked on a lot too, of course, here. But, you know, simplification, that they kind of met that goal. There are ways in which this is more complicated too, but the complexity is not really going to be a mental load side. It's more in some other areas. Another goal, I'm assuming, right, is draft, right? They keep wanting to make sets draftable. I'm sure this was something they were really, especially since Bill Stark was the lead designer for this set, I'm sure they really cared about draft for this set. And I'm worried about this one. There are some things that gave me cause for concern with how well this set is going to draft, and I asked some questions about that, and it sounds like they were aware of that and that they had taken some measures to help counteract that. So on its face, I believe them, but I'm a little bit worried that it could be one of those things where if you're an experienced drafter, then the set drafts pretty well, but I don't know how it's going to feel for a store of players that are just like, oh, we've never drafted before, let's try this out. I'm not 100% sure they're going to have the best experience, but it could be fine, right? It really does depend on what the full set looks like. And then the last goal would be that there's this spotlight format. They made this set huge for a reason. The set is 300 cards because they want this one set spotlight format to be pretty good, because they're going to run some form of competitive events are going to be spotlight. We don't know if it's going to be the regional, or if it's just going to be LQs, or maybe it's just the local championship, or maybe some combination of those things. But clearly they want this spotlight format to be supported so that new stores that start the game with this IP, those players can just play Attack on Titan Spotlight and have a good functioning format. And, you know, so first of all, with a 300 card set that you're doing to make the Spotlight format good, you're not going to make the set 90% chaff, right? Certainly not, you know, that I know a lot of people are worried that, like, oh, 3/4 of the set's just going to be blank cards. That's not happening. That's insane. That is, they would not make the set this big if they were going to make most of it literally trash, right? But there is going to be, you know, I'm sure we're going to see a continuing of the trend. Again, not that I saw enough of the set to say this for sure, but from the sample that I saw, it feels, you know, we might see a bit more of the trend of a little more, you know, single ability foundations at common, you know, maybe a few more blank type cards. I would say I think I only saw 1 blank card, and I was glad it was blank, for what it's worth. But the, you know, so we'll see a little bit more of that. It's not, the set's not going to be 100% every card in the set is meant to be a competitive card, but I think like 75, 80 something % of the set probably will be, or at least cards that they want to be in the picture that people might include in their spotlight decks. And what I'm worried about, and this isn't really a criticism because this is a hard thing to catch, this is a very unusual dynamic, but so every set you're going to have some swings and misses, right? You're going to have some cards. I've been there, right? I've been in the design process, the playtesting process. I've seen sets play out. I've known what people thought about cards in testing and in design and how they actually ended up turning out. I've seen this happen, you know, over several times now, right? And there's always cards that you think are going to be winners, that you think are going to see some play, that you think people are going to like, that, you know, you have some ideas of how these cards are going to play out, and then they just fall flat. If you thought they were going to be an interesting card that would find some homes, they just never find a home, and nobody ever really considers them for a deck, right? They're just complete swing and miss cards, and you're always going to have some of those. I think what they've done with this set, most of those things that they are adding or changing or whatever enhance the opportunities, add new ways, make things more likely to have those swings and misses. Right, so I'm concerned that because if you actually go back and look for examples, they've done a really good job, maybe a little bit less so in Girl Power, but in like Jetburn and Dark Tournament, of just not having these. There are very few cards you can look at from those sets and be like, oh yeah, that card's never going to have a home. There's a few, right? Especially if you start excluding cards that are clearly draft cards. There are not very many cards that are like, what is the point of this card? But with this set, because of all the things they're doing, they are making that a lot harder on themselves in a way that's probably not obvious when they look at like the individual pieces. I don't really expect them to have seen until pretty late in testing, at which point they wouldn't be able to change it, right? So I'm a little bit worried about exactly how much of this set is going to be relevant for the Spotlight format, even if they mean for most of it to be. Again, it may turn out that that doesn't happen at all. It may be that they still made contact on nearly all of these, and it's a great Spotlight format. I'm not predicting anything here, but it's a concern that I have just thinking about what it would be like to try to design a set with these things that they're doing and what some of the pitfalls might be. I think they've set a lot of traps for themselves, and hopefully they navigate that minefield pretty well. But on a brighter note, to end on just the micro design, which is sort of the design of the individual cards themselves, like the power level stuff and how interesting the cards were, I thought was pretty good. I don't think there may not have been any cards I looked at that I was like, oh, this thing's just bad. There were a couple cards that are like, this might be kind of niche. There was, I think it went uncommon or something that I looked at. I'm like, oh, I want to put that in such and such a deck that I have just right away. Can I have this right now? I think the cards we saw skewed a little higher rarity because we're showing off art and there's some treatments and stuff like that. But overall, the power level of the cards I saw was good. I don't think we have to worry about this being a Street Fighter situation where this set is just worse than everything around it. I also don't think we have to worry about this being like a Bebop Libra of Souls thing. I don't think this is ramping up the power from Jetburn, but the cards that I saw looked reasonable cards that will make sense and should find some homes in standard decks here and there. So power level wise, the set looks good. Again, as individual pieces, as once we have the whole thing and we're building decks particularly for Spotlight, less so than for Standard, but more so just as this isolated Spotlight format. I'm a little worried about how that's going to shake out in terms of the number of quote-unquote playables, but, we'll see how it goes. And that'll do it for my little recap of the Creator Summit. Hopefully, I don't know how long this took, but hopefully not too crazy long. Obviously, NDA things I can't answer too many specifics, but hey, if you have some questions, drop them in the comments. I can answer to the best of my ability. And for my next video might be, I don't know, I'll have to see what they show off this week in presumably a Thursday article of some kind, and we'll take it from there. All right, until then, have a good night.